Hey guys, a way too windy day to be out in the rice fields. An old man would have to be crazy. So, just a couple of things I saw this week in the media, one after another, that set this video off, as often does happen. There was two stories, right, that were sort of related to each other from our perspective. The first one was that one of the national government ministers' assistants, his aide, right, who'd be a public servant, not an elected official, just a public servant, apparently he finished work and he went to an izakaya near his home and had dinner and a couple of drinks and then drove round the corner to his house. So, as some of you would be aware, the alcohol limit in Japan is 0. So he got stopped by the police and he was found guilty of drunk driving. Now, the penalty for drunk driving is pretty harsh in Japan. It's about $10,000, or it can be about $10,000. They can actually, there's also an imprisonment option, and losing your license, I think it's for about a year. So it's pretty strict, and a 0 alcohol limit. So we've made videos about this before. It's very, very strict. However, it doesn't include you losing your job. That's not in the law. It doesn't say in the law that you get caught drink driving, you lose your job. However, Japanese employers, whether it be private enterprise, whether it be government, it could be said that they own their staff. So this is an example, it might be an example of that, is after this is a big story in the media, and that the minister involved apologised publicly and said that he should have supervised his aide better. Now keep in mind, this was in the dude's free time, so that this guy finished work and he'd stopped at his car on the way home to have dinner and a drink, so it was all in his free time, it wasn't during working time. But this minister said that he should have supervised and guided his employee better, or his aide better, because it's not his direct employee, is it? So he had to apologise and say very sorry, and then of course the aide lost his job. Right? Now we have seen in the media recently other examples over the years, well, not just recently, over the years, of people in other countries who've made mistakes in their personal lives and then had to pay a penalty in their professional lives. And it could be debated whether or not that's reasonable enough. From my point of view, if you break the law, there are already penalties dictated by the law that says, you do this, you get this penalty. So he got his legal penalty for his legal mistake in his private time, It had nothing to do with his work at all, And it might have been the same day or the next day. There was another story, this is funny, this one. Mitsui and Company, which is a pretty big company in Japan, announced that they're going to have a new policy in regards to part-time work, because most companies have a policy that staff are not allowed to have part-time jobs. So in your free time, when you're not at work, you're not allowed to have a part-time job. Most companies have that policy for full-time employees, right? Which, what you do in your free time, so it's okay for you to go and drink alcohol all day every day as long as you don't drive your car, or it's okay for you to play video games all day every day when you're not at work, but to go and have a part-time job is not acceptable as far as most companies are concerned, right? Which, for most of us, our thinking is as soon as we step outside our workplace and we're on our free time, we can do whatever the hell we want, right? But no, most of them have a policy and allow part-time jobs. So these guys, Mitsui and Company, announced, big announcement, right, that their staff would be allowed, under circumstances, to have part-time jobs, right? And a couple of the specifications were that it was not supposed to be primarily for income, right? So too bad if you want a part-time job to earn some extra money to pay your bills, right? They said that it shouldn't be primarily for income. So it's okay to earn money, but that shouldn't be the main reason that you're doing it, which, what? Right? And then they gave all sorts of bizarre examples that, for example, a person whose specialty is this might want to do some coaching of this or that or the other, or sort of related to their industry. Sort of you got the impression that it was okay for them to do things that might benefit the company indirectly, right? You know, in their free time, right? The other two that cracked me up was that, for example, they could do other things as well, creative things. For example, be a YouTuber, right? Which, yeah, that's a useful part-time job to help you pay your bills. You know, because I mentioned recently, you know, my average video on YouTube earns about 50 cents. So, you know, being a YouTuber is not going to pay your bills at all. And the other one was, or a novelist, right? So actually, I just realised right now I've done both of those. I didn't write a novel, I wrote a book, right? Our book called, what's it called? How to Do Stuff in Japan. So I've already written a book, and I'm a YouTuber, and I can tell you, you can't earn money from either of those things. That cracked me up, that one. You know, talk about impractical and out of touch. You know, what I have to comment on one of those, because one of them was on Facebook. It was a news story from a news organisation, and it shows how out of touch the rich old executives that run these big companies are with real people. You know, same as in a lot of countries, the high-level old men executives earn huge money. And I say old men because in Japan that's still the case. Most of the executives that run the big companies are old men. And, you know, earning huge amounts of money, right? So it shows how out of touch that they are, that they think, you know, a man with a young family or a lady with a young family who needs extra income, you know, let them be a YouTuber or a novelist, you know? Like that's going to help them pay their bills, you know? It's sort of more like, you got the impression it was more like, let them have a hobby, you know? Let them have a hobby, sort of missing the whole point of why a person would want a second job. So, but there's a lot of examples there. Schools are the same. Schools, you know, it's almost in preparation for getting kids ready for the workforce, is that schools have a lot of rules too about what kids are allowed to do and not do outside school hours. So, for example, most high schools have a rule that kids are not allowed to have part-time jobs. So, same as with the companies. So, high school kids are not allowed to have part-time jobs, and a lot of high school kids are 17, 18 years old. Not allowed to have part-time jobs. So that's why when you go to restaurants and shops and places where supermarkets in other countries you might see, you know, teenagers there working part-time jobs. Here you tend to see old retired people because the kids are not allowed to. Most of them, it's pretty rare. We do know one or two whose schools are pretty slack and allow them to do it, but most of the schools just don't allow them to have part-time jobs at all. So they sort of own you. You know, and that's the impression you get is the schools and the companies own them. You know, and lots of examples of the same thing where the school will say, okay, this weekend we're going to do this event. You've got to come to school 7 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, Saturday and Sunday, and that's it. Kids got to do it, no questions asked. Or the boss says on a Thursday afternoon, tomorrow night we're all having dinner at the izakaya. Everyone says hi, and there's no excuse. We've talked about this before. There's nothing higher than work. So family obligations, your mother's birthday, you know, any other preparation, any other plan you might have had, you've got to cancel it, because Friday night, in your free time, in your free unpaid time, you have to go and have dinner with the boss and drink beer with the boss, and everybody's got to pretend to be friends or something, you know. They own you. And then one step further, or one step worse, is a lot of companies have company apartments because they expect their staff to live away from home quite often. You know, we've talked about this before as well, where, you know, someone will live in, you know, Osaka and the company will transfer them to Tokyo, or, you know, vice versa, or, you know, send them to another city and they'll give them a company apartment. Also, some English teachers that, you know, people come here from other countries and work as English teachers, they're often given company apartments as well, which the cost of which is deducted from their wages, of course. But they'll often have really strict rules. We know a lady who works for one of the airlines, and we went to visit her once to pick her up, take her somewhere, and we couldn't go inside the apartment building because it had a rule that nobody was allowed to visit inside the apartment building. The only people allowed to go inside the apartment building was the staff that lived there. Now this, again, these are apartments that the staff pay for with their own money. The building is owned by the company, but, you know, it's their apartment where they live. It's their home, you know, but there's all these rules. You're not allowed to have people inside your apartment. You know, you have to go meet them outside your apartment. Sometimes they'll have like in the foyer, they'll have like a couple of sofas and things in the foyer. So if your friends come to visit you, or you know you're going to meet somebody, you can meet in the foyer. You don't meet upstairs in your room, in your apartment, right? You're an adult living in an apartment that you pay for. It's your home, and you're not allowed to have people in it. So this is the thing. There's a million examples of this. You know, the companies and the schools really own you. They totally own you, what you can do and what you can't do, and any sort of behaviour that you do outside work, you can end up being punished for it, you know, in your work environment. So, just as a side note, when I started English Friendly Japan 10, 12 years ago, I actually started that with a Japanese guy, and you know, we put a fair bit of time into it, but we could decide, as now, we can decide when we spend time working on it, you know, and we just got it going, and because I sort of needed him, because he did the Japanese side, I did the English speaking side, and he changed jobs, and the company said no part-time jobs, and he said, oh, I just started a website with this guy, and you know, I just sort of spend a few hours on it a week. Oh no, you can't do that. So that was it. That was it. He was gone. So they own you. Japanese companies and schools will own you. So anyway, just thought someone might find that interesting. If you're coming to Japan and you're going to be working here for a Japanese company, you've got to keep this in mind. They'll tell you what you can and can't do in your life. You know, it's really normal. There's some examples where that's not the case, but pretty rare. Can't remember hearing one. So, anyway, there it is. More videos coming soon.